Yeah, so I don't know if it's fixed yet.
3 years or something like that, because they brought everything either in congregation.
Good evening. Tonight is Monday, October 23rd, 2017. This is the regular city council meeting for the city of St. Peter. It is 7 o'clock p.m. We will call the meeting to order. Would all please join in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Everyone should have a copy of the agenda. Are there any changes or corrections to the agenda? If not, is there a motion for approval?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
All in favor of the agenda as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Agenda is approved. Next, we have the minutes of our October 9th, 2017 meeting. Those minutes appear on pages 4 through 6. Are there any changes or corrections to those minutes? If not, is there a motion for approval?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
All in favor of the minutes of that meeting, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. Next, we will address visitors. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to the council on any agenda item? Seeing no one, is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to the council on any item whatsoever? Seeing no one, we will move on. Next, we have the consent agenda. The consent agenda begins in detail on page 7 and concludes with the resolution on page 24 and includes the following: the employee appointment for Sheree Robinson for part-time building supervisor at $10.30 per hour. And then the next is a memo about the City Council workshop of December 18th, 2017, and the regular City Council meeting of December 25th, 2017 are hereby canceled. And staff will direct payables effective because of that change. And plus the regular schedule of disbursements for October 6th, 2017 through October 18th, 2017. Any questions or comments about the consent agenda? If not, is there a motion for approval?
Move the resolution, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Any questions now? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Brand,
Aye.
Councilmember Garland,
Aye.
Mayor Zeman,
Aye.
Councilmember Plummer,
Aye.
Councilmember Pfeiffer,
Aye.
Councilmember Graham,
Aye.
Councilmember Harris.
Aye.
Consent agenda is approved. Next is unfinished business, which we have none, so we will move right into new business. And the first is the tax increment financing plan. And Mr. Sweeney is here to join us again tonight.
Greetings, Mayor, members of the council. Shannon Sweeney from David Drown Associates. On August 28th, we held a public hearing regarding the creation of Tax Increment Financing District number 1-22. It's a redevelopment tax increment district that intends to capture new property taxes that results from new development that's planned to occur on the former Sherry's Flowers site, or Mary's Flowers, I'm sorry, Mary's Flowers site. I once lived above Sherry's Closet in town, so sorry for the confusion.
Was she aware that you lived up?
Probably not. Thanks. Again, it's a redevelopment district. We're creating the district for the purpose of promoting new development in areas of the community that are facing some blighting conditions in this instance. And so we're intending to provide some form of assistance that will be detailed in your discussion following the adoption of the TIF plan with Russ. But the purpose of the district, again, is to create this mechanism under Minnesota statute where we're capturing new property taxes associated with a new project to be constructed on that site. The overall capture term provided for under statute is up to 26 years. We are intending to provide or use this tool for a period much shorter than that. And so again, Russ will talk about that as he talks about a development agreement following our discussion on the TIF plan. TIF plan includes I guess, a few important things. It includes a map, which is detailed on the overhead. It includes a budget that establishes the maximum amount of revenue and expenditures that can occur within this district. As we discussed at the public hearing, we inflate that budget for the purpose of being able to accommodate changes in development plans that could occur between when the TIF plan is adopted and when projects are implemented. Allows for some expansion of the TIF district if redevelopment gains traction and we wish to do more. We try to provide as much flexibility as we can within that plan. More than happy to answer your questions on the tax increment plan. There's a resolution that accompanies that plan within your packet that provides for its adoption. So again, if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to try to address those.
Questions for Mr. Sweeney? Yes, Steve?
Mr. Sweeney, on page 43 of our packet, can you just clarify a few things for me? I'm kind of in a black hole tonight here. Increased market value of site, I think I know what that means. Less present value of TIF of revenues. Estimated increased site value with or without TIF. And then the net value increase. Can you explain those categories, please?
As a part of state statute, we're required to apply a test when we're creating a tax increment district. And the test is that what we're doing is of greater benefit than if we do nothing. And so they have us speculate on the maximum market value that could be created as a result of new development in that district. Again, as part of the process of drafting this TIF plan, we do a robust projection on what we would expect for new development to occur so that we have greater flexibility in administering this district and you don't have to hire us again to modify things. So we have to do we have to meet this test that says what we're anticipating to assist with tax increment will be better off for all units of government involved than if we do nothing. And so we're speculating on what would happen with and without the creation of this TIF district. We're assigning numbers to that speculative calculation that we're doing, and we're producing a result that demonstrates that, in fact, creating the TIF district is a better result than letting what's there today continue to remain. So.
Yeah, and I have one final question, Mr. Mayor. Is that okay?
Yes, go ahead, Steve.
In talking, I understand that you make an annual report on all of our TIF districts.
I do.
Can you give me a rough estimate of how many TIFs districts that we have ongoing right now in our city limits?
Ooh, a rough estimate. This is 1-22. So in the history of the community, we have 22. Of that, I would say almost half or better are now gone. They've expired. That property is on the tax rolls, and no longer in a TIF district.
So overall, it's been a real benefit to our community.
Yeah, we've done a lot of diverse projects that, again, each time we've had a council that's looked at it and thought that without the use of tax increment, we probably wouldn't have the development that's occurring, and therefore we're better off by making use of the tool. So.
Okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else?
My microphone is very sensitive tonight, so I'll whisper. When we had the last meeting that you were at, some folks in the community had noticed the $800,000 figure that's on page 29 in this packet tonight. And they were a little bit alarmed because there was conversation in the community after that meeting where they thought we were proposing to spend up to $800,000 on the development of the Dunkin' Donuts strip mall building. And that is not the case. Could you talk a little bit more about what that $800,000 number represents?
Sure.
And then put that in the context of the $65,000 of the proposed development agreement?
Sure. When we draft a TIF plan, again, one of our goals is to give the community as much flexibility as they can have as time progresses. And we understand that through the development process, lots of things can change in the next 5 years, which is the time period we have to incur obligations in this district. Things can change or happen. Most notably, And the thing that we want to provide for in most instances, including this one, is when we create this tax increment district, we're including the public rights of way adjacent to it. Now, let's say, for example, in year 3, all of a sudden we determine that all of the sewer, water, storm sewer in the street needs to be reconstructed. By having a budget that accommodates, those kinds of costs, which is where we put most of and we can actually reassign that budget, we give you flexibility to ultimately decide in the next 5 years whether or not you would want to take additional increments and apply those to other items. As you've mentioned and as Russ will discuss, our commitment to this project is well defined and is not anywhere close to $800,000. It's essentially $65,000 in demolition and some site improvement costs. That obligation to the project is defined within the development agreement. What we include in the TIF plan is what the state holds us to overall with regard to budget and what we can accomplish. That's two very different things. So we're not obligating the city to collect or spend $800,000 in this process. We're adopting a TIF plan that kind of maps out the future as best we can. But we have not obligated the city to spend money, to engage with a developer through the adoption of a TIF plan. That happens through the development agreement that Russ is going to present. And again, that specifically provides for something much less than the budget in our TIF plan.
One follow-up. So, am I right in understanding that the 800,000 is an estimate of the potential tax increment that could be collected over the 26-year period? Would
Yes.
that be a fair way of stating that?
Yes.
So-
And we not only account for the revenue, but possible expenditures.
Right.
Yep.
So that's the maximum amount of increased tax that could come off of this parcel of land over the next 26 years, estimate,
Yes.
roughly.
Yeah. And
I realize
that's a robust estimate.
Right. And so of all that we could potentially enter into some sort of development agreement with, we're choosing to go into a development agreement of 65,000,
Yes.
leaving all the rest of that potential 800,000 over the next few decades available for other uses.
Yeah. If we had to basically predict the future today, I would say this district will be gone in 6 or 7 years. The developer will have been reimbursed for some of the site improvements and demolition expense incurred, and the property will be back on the tax rolls, and everybody will be benefiting accordingly. So,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Which, if we're using that 325,000 times roughly 3.5%, we're looking at $10,000 a year increment. I would, if we're using that number, so yeah, it should take care of 7 years, should
Yep.
Yeah.
pretty much do it.
Yeah. And we do have, as we'll illustrate in the development agreement, it's the earlier of the district going away, the time period that we set for reimbursement, the developer being paid, so all of these things will trigger a shorter life of the district rather than longer.
Okay. Anyone else?
And just to clarify.
Susie, again?
Yes. We don't actually necessarily expect that this parcel of land will produce $800,000 of taxes over this period.
No. Well, again, it's a robust projection for the purposes of complying with state statute and giving you
He's telling the state
flexibility.
that that's a real possibility.
That is an optimistic possibility. That is the best of all
Yes.
possible scenarios.
Yes.
Right. Great.
Questions? Susie? You're done?
People always have lots of questions about TIF districts, so I'm just
Yeah.
hoping
No, you're fine.
to clarify some of that. Thank you.
No, you are absolutely fine. Anyone else? If not, the resolution approving creation of tax increment financing district number 1-22 appears on pages 44, 45, and 46. Is there a motion for approval?
Move the resolution.
Second.
Any other questions or comments? Call the roll, please, Bart.
Councilmember Curran.
Aye.
Mayor Ziegler.
Aye.
Councilmember Klein.
Aye.
Councilmember Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Councilmember Graham.
Aye.
Councilmember Paris.
Aye.
Councilmember Brand.
Aye.
Resolution passes. Next, we have, thank you, Shannon. Next, we have Russ to go over the development agreement for this property with us.
Mayors and members of the city council, you're here, you're here tonight for a number of different reasons, but you're asked tonight to consider the development agreement that's been drafted by and between the city of St. Peter and Growth Holdings LLC. The development agreement is regarding the redevelopment of lots 9 and 10 of block 194 of the amended plat, or what's more probably locally known as 1115 and 1123 South Minnesota Avenue. As Shannon had said, this is the former Mary's Flowers site, and then the abutting residence to the north. Following the demolition of the existing structures, Growth Holdings would seek to construct a strip mall upon the site, which contains a Dunkin' Donuts franchise as well as 1 or 2 additional commercial operations. When we began the process, it was the Mary's Flowers site on its own, which the developer determined was not sufficient for to complete the development they'd contemplated. So at that point, they purchased the Butenhoff residence to the north. At first, a review of the zoning map indicated that Mary's Flowers was zoned residential, and it was actually engineers at Bolton and Mank that found a zoning map alteration in their files. What had happened is when the site was rezoned for Kind Vet Clinic in the early 90s, the official map in the Office of the Community Development Director was not altered to reflect that council action. As such, in 2007, when the comprehensive, or the zoning ordinance was comprehensively amended and the gateway was established, this property wasn't even known it was commercial, so it was not included in the gateway. At that point, then, it was determined that the 1123 South Minnesota Avenue would need to be rezoned to C4 to accommodate the proposed development. While neither property is located in the Gateway Overlay District, I did make an attempt to utilize the development agreement to achieve the stated intent of the Gateway Overlay District, which is to promote a quality development which creates a positive first impression upon those entering the city. The development agreement presented to you tonight contemplates the developer's access to $65,000 as a pay-as-you-go tax increment benefit to partially finance the cost of demolition and then the utility removals and extensions. The development agreement then further obligates that the developer begin the demolition on the site no later than November 15th, and that the improvements are substantially completed by June 1 of 2018. The development agreement obligates the developer to undertake certain off-site improvements, which he is excited and very willing to do. It would include the pavement of the adjoining alleys and perpetual plowing, patching, repair, or reconstruction of those alleys as determined by your Director of Public Works. The proposed agreement obligates the developer to cooperate with the private residents to the north of the property to pave at the developer's expense the private drive accessing the improved alley. And finally, it obligates the developer to cooperate with the same residents to install, again at the developer's expense, a screen to eliminate the headlight flicker illumination of the private residence. The development agreement then obligates the developer to undertake the improvements based upon the site plan and building elevations contained in Addendum A of the agreement. This is the site plan that had been reviewed by the City Council at the last 2 council workshop sessions. I will note that the development meets the development regulations of the C4 district with the utilization of a limited application of permeable pavers to meet the required lot coverage ratio. As Mr. Sweeney had indicated, the way it works is if this is approved, the developer constructs a site, he provides me with paid invoices of at least $65,000. At that point, we would execute the TIF note in the form largely that's included in the packet, and the developer then would be access semi-annual tax increment payments as long as the developer paid the real estate taxes in the first place. So they pay the full real estate taxes and then they are given a partial reimbursement. The tax increment development agreement then would terminate at the time that the developer received $65,000 in tax increment payments or February 1 of 2024, whichever would come first. an analysis of the tax increments due until February 1, 2024 indicate that the developer would likely be reimbursed to the full $65,000. And if that occurs sooner, then we'll eliminate the district and, again, get the full tax value on the tax rolls. The developer has consented to the terms of the proposed agreement, and the city administrator has 2 signed copies in his possession as per the council consideration, for council consideration as per the adopted policy. There is a resolution on page 69 which does contemplate authorization of execution, but Mayor, I'd answer any questions that you or members of the council may have.
Questions? John?
These additional expenses that are, you talked about the paving and the fence, you said they would be at the developer's expense. Aren't they part of the TIF district? Doesn't he get reimbursed?
I didn't get all your question. I'm sorry, Mr. Coyne.
These additional expenses that you talked about that are being made for the alley paving and for the fence, you characterize them as being at the developer's expense. Aren't they part of the TIF district?
They are located within the TIF district, if I may answer, Mayor. But we do expect that the expenses that the developer will occur that are within the statutory rules related to reimbursable expenses will far exceed the $65,000 potentially. And so, you know, there are statutory rules related to what's allowed or what's not allowed within that expense category.
Why did we limit it to $65,000 then? I thought the purpose of the TIF was to reimburse the developer for these site improvement expenses.
I would say that the purpose of the TIF is to incent a developer to make improvements, and this is part of that incentive that meet those statutory rules. I don't know that it's ever been the policy of the City Council within any TIF district to reimburse for every potential expense that could be out there that would be within those rules. So, John, are you saying that it would be your goal to see that number increase?
No, it's just that the members of the council have talked about how we disincentivize developers or are not encouraging enough of development in the community, and this would seem to be an easy way to counteract that.
I think as you send staff forward, you give us the charge of trying to negotiate what we believe is to be an appropriate deal for the council to review and for the taxpayers in town. And if there's not more than $65,000 of incentive necessary, it would be my goal to ensure that the number is not beyond $65,000 as it would be in this case. I don't know that you want to provide incentive that's more than necessary to incent the developer to make the improvements that within that district.
Oh, I absolutely agree with that. But then if I'm hearing rumblings that we don't do enough to promote development, maybe this is a way to do that.
That would be a policy question for the council, how you want to approach that into the future.
So those of you who were voicing that concern can offer policy improvements at our next goal-setting session.
Definitely. I think one of the differences is the carrot or the stick, right? I would like us to be easier to do for businesses to do business with, not because they're getting dollars as an incentive, but as our policy is just easier to work with. So I'd like to see if there's any areas where we could improve in that area, where we don't have to incent them with any money, but it's just easy to deal with. You know, some of our hands get tied because of state code or state policy, things like that, but, you know, make sure that the city is not adding to that.
Go ahead.
I mean, I think, Mayor and members, I think it would be important for you to have data and be able to quantify at what level you think it's appropriate, not just from a financial standpoint, but from any type of incentive or process standpoint. I know that you have had developers that have come to your council and either received a loan or have received a land use change or have received a tax increment district or simply just wanted to see something developed downtown and have told you that you were easy to work with. I know you also have people that come and say you're hard to work with. Roger, as you mentioned, Sometimes that relates to state rules that we end up being the enforcers for. Sometimes there are rules that we end up being the enforcers for, and in those instances, both the folks that have said they were treated well and those who may have said, well, it could have been a lot easier, that's just one perspective. The council has the very important charge of trying to find what the balance is in those things. And you're just not working with that business, as an example. You're working with the neighbor who's going to be next door to that business. And so you have to also balance their needs, wants, priorities as well. And sometimes that requires enforcement. And so you have a tough charge, finding that point of balance. And frankly, that's one of the reasons you're elected. And so I think if that is an issue that you want to talk about further, how you might incent people, what the real issues are, is it the permits are too complicated, there's too much paperwork, it's not online, you're not enforcing the right rules, you're enforcing too many rules. I mean, I think those are all great points for discussion, but you should work from the basis of having data that supports what really is the issue that's going on.
Any other questions, Steve?
Russ, can you, is the developer putting a opaque fence on the north side of the property also?
No, he's going to intend to use decorative plantings that would be try to achieve the 75% opaqueness that was mentioned at the workshop.
Okay. Now, I might need an arborist to tell me this, and we've got John Kawami here, so he could help me with this. What's moon shadow? I can't even pronounce it. Echinus? What is that?
What page are you on?
I'm on the spreadsheet that shows the detail of the layout, John.
If I can, before John's answers, it would be the intent of the staff.
Yeah, what is that, John?
It's a shrub.
Oh, thank you, John. That was an easy answer. And what's,
It turns a lovely red in the fall.
A burning bush is.
There you go.
oh, all right. Okay. And what's techno arborative? What is that?
Techni
Yeah, what-
arborvitae.
Yes,
It's a
what is
dense
that?
green, columnar, small tree.
Okay, and we have one swamp oak there, is that correct? One?
Yeah, what are you getting at, Steve?
I'm just curious. I don't know what these are. That's why I like to ask the question, And
Probably should have looked them up before.
I know, I was thinking about that before I asked the question. I should have, but I didn't. So,
Russ, I had a question. You mentioned 2024 as the date of term of basically this would expire.
Yeah, we should have achieved paying back the $65,000 by then if we used the projections contained in the TIF plan of about a $21,000 collection per year.
Oh, if you're using a $21,000 collection per year, yeah, then you would. I was just saying, because, I don't know when they're starting, but everything, the value and therefore the taxes payable is determined January 2nd of each year. So if they don't get started till after January 2nd, 2018, we're not gonna see any taxes increase in 2019, and then not until 2020. So, if that's what we're using as a basis, I don't know, are there any extensions on this, or what's the complications?
Well,
that
we'd
might
have to come
occur
back and make an amendment, so if
if need be.
I would believe the developer to give them more opportunity to make sure they get the full 25. If
Right.
the council are willing to extend that to 2026.
So
that
there's
would give-
2024 can be changed without.
It could be changed tonight. Yeah, I would suggest it could be.
Okay. Well, it just concerns me that if, like I say, it's probably 2020 before we see
Well,
any taxes.
In the developer's review of the agreement and the TIF plan, I think he understands the risk that he's facing also.
Okay.
That, and any number of things could change in the 90, some tax compression, reduced the number of TIFs, and a lot of people were caught short, but what happened is you're paying less taxes up front, so you're getting less in return. So community people would like to think it's somewhat a wash.
My concern was that we weren't closing in where all we're gonna do is create ourselves some more paperwork and gyrations a little later in 2024. Is my concern.
If the developer was not fully reimbursed $65,000 by that time, he would have no recourse other than to ask you
Okay.
to come back and change it. You'd be not obligated to do so.
Right. Okay. John?
Russ, I have a question on the zoning mix-up now has resulted in these two lots having a different zoning than the commercial areas around them, or a little island, a little spot. What's our plan for rectifying this?
I intend to add the matter onto the planning commission meeting for the, I think it's the 2nd of November, and have some discussions there, full explanation on what happened, and then the options going forward. The rezoning can be initiated by the property owner, the planning commission, or the council. We found when we did the comprehensive amendment, it was opportune because then we were rezoning areas larger than 5 acres in size, which has to do with your notices for the hearings. But I'd intend to talk to the planning commission and see what they would like to do. Looking at the regulations of the gateway, it would be very hard to implement that on such a small parcel.
But this development would be grandfathered in.
It would be from now on, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
So that's it's not an issue for this developer.
Yeah, I intend to have a conversation with the planning commission and then talk again some about those limitations on trying to do the gateway. A lot of the yard requirements probably align themselves with larger lots, perhaps north of the Shopko, where you've got the large lot abutting.
Let's have a discussion about what the gateway overlay should look like. I'm talking about these two lots. How do we make them part of the zone that everybody around them is already in?
The property to the south is in that.
Yes. Once the certificate of occupancy is issued for this building, then certainly any zoning changes we make would not be applicable. He would be grandfathered in. Is that correct?
Yes, and then it wouldn't be applied on redevelop unless the use changed.
So why don't we ask the developer once to petition the city once the certificate of occupancy is issued to petition the city for it to be rezoned, and the city will offer to waive all the rezoning fees.
I will make that request to the developer.
Why don't we put it in the agreement tonight that we will make that we want a verbal assurance from him. We don't need a written assurance because if you can't trust a developer, who can you trust?
But
a verbal assurance would be enough.
But I guess I have a problem with that because maybe not everybody here tonight, John, agrees with that.
You can't have a little hole in the middle of the zoning map.
Yeah, we can. We do now. There's a little hole there now.
It wasn't supposed to be there.
Wasn't supposed to be there, but they're meeting all of the guidelines.
And we're not talking about changing any of the guidelines or making them do anything different. We're saying once they have built the building, then make their zone look like everybody in the neighborhood, which has no impact, no impact on them.
Right, once they have built the building.
Yes, to receive the certificate of occupancy.
But I can see doing that, but I can't see us changing the development agreement. I don't agree with it.
No.
Well, that's what you just stated a little earlier. Let's change it now.
I said, let's put in and say that we will sign this upon receipt from the developer of a verbal assurance that once the certificate of occupancy has been issued, that he will petition the city to make his zoning the same as all his neighbors, and the city will offer assurance that they will waive all petition fees.
If I can, Mayor and members, if that's what you'd like us to do, we can certainly do that. In my mind, that's us renegotiating the deal. If you modified the resolution and direct staff to request that, I would have no problem making that request, and my guess is that the developer might be amenable to that, but I can't renegotiate that at this point.
I'm comfortable with changing a verbal assurance to staff requests. That's fine.
We're happy to make that request.
That makes staff more comfortable, and you think that's an easier way to do it, that's fine with me.
That would be fine with me, because once again, if we do it the way, I understand that you're presenting it initially, and we just talked about not making things more difficult for a developer. So here we are going back to them again under that first way you presented it, and I just don't agree with that.
Okay, then let's do it the second way.
That I can live with.
Okay, then
I can go the second way.
where the staff makes a request to the developer.
Yeah, staff request.
So if I can, Mayor and members, if that's the direction you'd like to go, we can add a second paragraph on that now, therefore, that directs staff to make that request of the Growth Holdings LLC.
that they petition after the certificate of occupancy is issued, and the city guarantees that they will waive all petition fees associated with any petition.
Once again, I don't like the word that we're going to guarantee that.
Well, the city's offers their assurance that they
Right.
will.
I- Does everyone understand? I mean, that's,
Because if we're all here saying that, we're all assuring it, we're the ones that have to approve it when it comes up. So,
If I can, Mayor and members, just for clarification, that may not be the case, but it could be the case.
well, he's not changing, only if the others can, so the majority will still be unchanged.
any other questions of Russ? If not, the resolution authorizing execution of development agreement appears on page 69. Is there a motion for approval? John?
I'll move the amended motion.
Second.
Any other questions, comments? Steve?
So are we saying that we're going to add another paragraph to this resolution, Mr. Mayor?
What we're saying is we're going to add another whereas that the staff will go to the developer and just ask that they request a rezoning. We aren't requiring them to do it. We're just saying that staff will approach the developer, and it's on the record now that we have that request.
If I may chime in.
Yes.
Let me, my understanding of the goal and how I hope to articulate this is that there would be a second paragraph that would be drafted as the end paragraph to that resolution under the now therefores. And you have to give me a little bit of latitude because I'm doing this off the top of my head. But it would essentially be directional for staff. And it would say, staff is also hereby directed to pursue a petition from Growth Holdings LLC that would establish a gateway district on the properties of 1115 and 1123, or the PIN numbers, or the whatever locational data we need. That would be my hope. I know that sentence could flip just a little bit, but that's how I hope to articulate it, and I think is a rational, reasonable direction on the part of the council.
But we're not, but Steve, I think maybe the difference, we're not demanding that he do it. The staff is presenting it as a question, would you be willing to do it under certain situations? Am I correct,
As
John?
long
Is
as-
that
yeah,
the way, that's the way I understood it.
Right, as long as it's not a demand, then I can go along with it. But if it is a
Right.
demand, I can't go along with it.
Right.
It would be my hope to use the terminology we'll request from Growth Holdings LLC.
Okay. And that, John, that understanding is what you want, your amended is?
Yes, it is, exactly.
Okay, all right. Are there any other questions or comments? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye.
Councilmember White.
Aye.
Councilmember Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Councilmember Graham.
Aye.
Councilmember Harris.
Aye.
Councilmember Brand.
Aye.
Aye.
Amended resolution passes. Next up, we have a building code regulation update. Todd, you're going to handle this one?
Yes, I am, Mayor and members, I'm sorry, and I know Dean, your building official, sends his apologies. He had a family issue that he had to take care of tonight, so I'm going to do my best to cover this one. This is an item that you have discussed previously at a workshop. From my perspective, this is a technical clarification in your ordinance related to the Minnesota State Building Code, and I think the memo outlines it really fairly well on page 70, which lists off on page 70 and 71 your current code and what we would want to see as the new code under section 10-31. And really what we're trying to do is eliminate A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, et cetera, and allow the code to flow with the code adoption that's done through the state legislature. That's the most appropriate way for us to continue to go forward. That is how we administer the code, review the code, inspect against the code currently. The concern has been raised that, well, it says it this way in your ordinance, but your intent has been this. Let's make sure that they're congruent and there's clarification. And so that's the basis for this request. Also mentioned that we did provide notices as required under state law, the new state law, which started in August, relative to changes in your ordinance. And the ordinance is included on page 73. and 74. And again, there's no elimination, there's no adding. It's just changing the verbiage from the listing so that it flows with as the state rules and statutes are changed.
Questions? Not the ordinance, as Todd mentioned, for the building code regulation update appears on page 73 and 74. Is there a motion for approval?
I'll make that motion, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Now, any questions? Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Plum.
Aye.
Councilmember Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Councilmember Graham.
Aye.
Councilmember Paris.
Aye.
Councilmember Brand.
Aye.
Councilmember Carlin.
Aye.
Mayor Singh.
Aye. Ordinance is approved. Next up, we have a Baseball Association donation acceptance. Mr. Moulton.
Mayor Zeman and City Council, the St. Peter Baseball Association has been very active in trying to make the press box complete for our benefit. And they have solicited a countertop to fit in the upstairs remodeling that they have done, which will look very nice in that area. The value is about $8,500 that would come from Cambria. And we're asking approval of that donation. The Parks Board has taken action on it already and has approved it as meeting part of the guidelines of improvements at the ball field.
Question? Awesome. So, Pete, this $8,500, it's through the Baseball Association, but is Cambria donating to the Baseball Association?
Right.
Am I understanding this right?
That's correct. The
Okay.
Baseball Association approached
Okay.
Cambria and came up with the idea of putting that in there.
Yep.
They
Good.
didn't have the details worked out when we brought the press box to you for approval, and so now they've finalized that deal and be a great addition.
Fanciest press box in
Yeah.
Minnesota. Anyway. Questions? Jeff?
So just a question on the product itself. So most of these they're built for indoor use, but
Right.
this is more going to be an outdoor use. There won't be any issues, or that's been discussed.
That has been one of the questions that we've asked the Baseball Association to check into, and they feel that it'll last quite a while for what their contribution is, so.
Good.
Anyone else? John?
So the Baseball Association deserves credit for being the facilitator for this, but it's really Cambria that should be getting our thanks for the donation.
Yeah, Cambria's always been a
Correct.
good sponsor of St. Peter Baseball. They've done quite a bit of additional work throughout a variety of locations, so. Baseball Association has a very close relationship with them and have worked really hard to make a lot of things happen for the betterment of baseball.
Questions? Comments?
It's great.
Resolution accepting donation of countertop for press box from the St. Peter Baseball Association by way of Cambria appears on page 76. Is there a motion for approval?
Move the resolution, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Any other questions or comments? Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Councilmember Graham.
Aye.
Councilmember Paris.
Aye.
Councilmember Brand.
Aye.
Councilmember Carlin.
Aye.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye.
Councilmember Plum.
Aye.
Resolution passes. That concludes our new business. Thank you, Pete. Next up, we have reports. The only thing, since we don't meet on camera for like 3 weeks, November 7th is the Tuesday. It's election night, so all please go out and vote. And other than that, it will be a little too late, but there will be, I'm going to mention it anyway, tomorrow afternoon, Tuesday, October 24th, is the groundbreaking for the Solus project on the north end of town. So 4 o'clock tomorrow. And that's all I have.
Mayor members, I have a few on your list, and I'll stick very tightly to those. First of all, training updates. I wanted to mention to the City Council that your cultural literacy training that you worked cooperatively on with Nicollet County and North Mankato, the last sessions of those were last Tuesday. Last Thursday, we had all staff training, and so that was completed. As you know, we do 2 of those a year, one that's a couple hours and one that's a little bit longer, about 4 hours. And it includes lots of things, including rules and discussion about how to manage the S drive on our server system and benefit issues for employees and reminders on all kinds of things, from change of employment status to change of family status, for all kinds of different things. So I think always good trainings. We also do have a discussion about upcoming developments so that staff know, because they get questions. people ask them what's going on. And so it's good to have them in the know at a level that gives them the opportunity to provide answers. Do want to mention that the Finance Committee meeting is scheduled to meet on November 20th. The Finance Committee meeting will meet to review the proposed contract with City Attorney. This is the standard process that you use. It occurs sometimes every year, but recently every other year, because you've entered into 2-year contracts with the City Attorney and the firm that he represents. I also want to mention as the third item, congratulations to the City of St. Peter, to the City Council, and certainly to Pete. You've regained a seat on the SIMPA board. And so Pete worked very hard to make sure that his name was in there. And of course, these are seats that are provided to the city, and Pete is your representative of that. And I can't tell you how fantastic that is. And so we're really proud of that. And it's also very beneficial for us to be a member of that board. For you to have a representative there at those levels, that's been extremely beneficial to us over the last number of years, as Lou had that seat for a number of years. So fantastic, way to go, Pete. And with that, I'll mention that I'm going to get out of the way for a few seconds and ask Pete to talk about curbside leaf collection. I know he was out on the road yesterday around town with my mother looking at all the leaves, and she's really happy to go out for a drive and could see all the leaves. And it was a beautiful day, and there were more people raking yesterday afternoon than I can certainly remember in recent memory, or frankly at the same time over the last couple of years as well. So Pete, what are we doing with leaf collection?
Well, we're one day in. We had a couple breakdowns today, but the crews were very fast at getting some repairs done. And so we started on the north end of town, working from east to west, and very successful at getting a lot of the piles started here on our mission of about 4 weeks. We do have a plan that we'd like to work with our customers a little bit. We realize that this fall has been a little bit unusual in that we've had moisture and the leaves aren't coming off the trees quite as fast as we had liked. But we will continue to work with our customers. If we've been by your place, be patient with us. We'll make another swing or another pass back by. But we will have a map. We'll update our website so you guys can see where we've been and what we're doing. And then we'll also be working with different volunteer groups throughout the town when they do leaf and pickup for some of the elderly throughout the community.
So Pete, the best place for people to kind of keep updated will be our website and maybe Facebook?
Yep, Facebook will be one of them, and then we'll have a map on there, we hope, that we can update every so often. You'll see where we're at and how we're doing things. Crews are out there basically sunrise to sunset. We'd like to stay in daylight hours if we can. It just helps with traffic and accidents and seeing people and kids, and so Parks crew is doing a nice job on getting things going.
Can we just remind everybody that we're asking them to rake their leaves to the edge of the boulevard, but not to push them into the street itself?
Right. Please follow that guideline too, because we also have 2 street sweepers that are out there picking up the loose leaves and debris that come with raking yards. And so that really taxes our sweepers if the piles are too big. It fills them up and burns them up really quick as far as the capacity that they have. And so if they can keep them on the edge, we'll use the big vac to get those pulled up in a pretty quick period. But the less it goes into the curb, the quicker we can get them up.
Susie?
And likewise, if we have another rain event in the next few days, all those leaves, if they're in the street, are going to wash right into the
They're
storm.
going to go to the storm sewer.
sewers.
Yep.
Keep
And
them
plug
on the
it up
yard.
and we'll have issues. So.
Mayor and members, that's the last item that I have for you for
All right.
tonight.
Anyone else have anything? I have one other item I just thought of here, since it's still going on, the haunted hayride at the Mill Pond still runs this upcoming weekend, Friday and Saturday, I believe, are the last 2 nights. So,
And the snowmobile event, a new event
yes,
on Gray Street.
then along with that, so. Anyone else? If not, is there a
Move
motion?
adjournment, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Jerry.
Second.
All in favor of adjournment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.
North Fork, Amy wanted to remind you that you guys are behind. You guys lost out.
Yeah, we'll get there.